The ballroom at the Beaumont estate was a masterpiece of denial. Beneath the blaze of 1,000 candles, society's elite danced, hiding their scandals behind ivory fans and false smiles. The Duke of Ravenswood, Alistair Vance, lingered among them, a prisoner of duty, his eyes fixed on the woman who would be his duchess. But then, a whisper, not intended for his ears, cut through the music. It wasn't about her gown or her dowry. It was a poisoned dart aimed at the very heart of his future. "The real Elara," a voice hissed, "had that dreadful scar. This one is a flawless fake." Alistair froze, the music dying in his ears. The woman wearing his ring was an impostor, and the whisper that just shattered his world was only the beginning. The air in the Duke of Beaumont's ballroom was thick, heavy with the scent of hothouse roses and the unspoken pressure of 1,000 expectations. It was July, 1888, and the London season was at its suffocating peak. Lord Alistair Vance, the 9th Duke of Ravenswood, stood near a marble alcove, his expression carefully neutral. He was a man carved from duty, not desire. At 32, he was considered the most eligible bachelor in England, yet he found no joy in it. His title was ancient, his lands vast. But the Ravenswood line was built on honour, not extravagance. He was here for one reason: to finalise the alliance. His betrothed, Lady Elara Harrington, was a vision in white satin, her copper-gold hair catching the light. She was perfect. Too perfect. Alistair watched her across the room. Their engagement had been a swift, clinical affair, negotiated by solicitors and her formidable mother, the Baroness Harrington. He had only met Elara 3 times. She was beautiful, impeccably mannered, and possessed a glacial poise that left him entirely cold. He'd resigned himself to a life of polite, separate rooms and a future heir. It was the price of his station. He lingered, nodding at acquaintances, his mind calculating the cost of the new agricultural reforms he planned for his tenants, the real reason he needed the Harrington dowry. His family wasn't poor, but this marriage would secure his legacy of progress. He turned to retrieve a glass of champagne, moving just behind a large potted palm. It was then, shielded from view, that the whisper found him. The voices belonged to 2 of society's most feared matriarchs, Mrs. Agatha Trimble and Lady Beatrice Croft. They were seated on a velvet chaise, their lorgnettes trained on his future bride. "It is a masterful recovery, one must admit," Lady Croft murmured, her voice a dry rattle. "To think, after that dreadful carriage accident 5 years ago, she would be so unmarked." "Unmarked?" Mrs. Trimble scoffed, snapping her fan. "Beatrice, you are too kind. She is unrecognizable. I saw Elara Harrington at Bath, the season before the accident. The girl was, how shall I put it, bookish, awkward. And that scar." Alistair's hand, reaching for the glass, stopped. "Oh, the scar, yes." Lady Croft leaned in. "A nasty, jagged thing on her left hand. From a riding fall, they said. She was dreadfully self-conscious of it, always wore gloves. But this girl—" Mrs. Trimble's voice dropped to a conspiratorial hiss, a sound that sliced through Alistair's composure. "This girl has the hands of a porcelain doll, and the eyes. The real Elara had green eyes, like sea glass. This creature's a brown, and the girl I knew was tall, almost gawky. This one is petite, perfectly proportioned. No. The Baroness is a clever woman, I'll grant her that. She spirited the real one away to some Swiss sanatorium, and after 5 years produces this flawless replacement. They say the original girl simply vanished. It's a sham, Agatha. A bold, brazen sham." The sound of a glass shattering was the only thing that marked the moment. But Alistair hadn't dropped his. A nearby waiter had. Alistair himself was perfectly still, a statue of ice, a sham, unrecognizable, the real Ilara. The words echoed in the sudden silence in his mind. The music swelled again, but it was distant, distorted. He turned his head slowly, deliberately, and looked at the woman who would be his wife. Lady Ilara Harrington was smiling at the French ambassador, her brown eyes sparkling with practiced charm. Her white gloves were short, ending at the wrist, and her hands were, as the women had said, flawless. He had been so focused on duty, on the dowry, on the future of his lands, that he had never truly looked at the woman. He had never asked about her past, her recovery, her time in Switzerland. He had simply accepted the pristine package presented to him by the Baroness. Alistair Vance, the Duke of Ravenswood, a man who prided himself on his sharp intellect and unwavering control, realized he was the centerpiece of a monstrous fraud. The whisper hadn't just shattered his evening. It had shattered his future, his honor, and his entire understanding of the woman he was set to marry in 2 weeks. And the only question that burned in his mind was, who is she? The blood drained from Alistair's face, only to be replaced by a cold, calculating rage. He was not a man given to public displays of emotion. He straightened his waistcoat, his movements precise, betraying none of the storm raging within him. He crossed the ballroom. The crowd parted for him, as it always did. The whispers followed him now, but of a different sort. Admiration, envy. He ignored them. "Lady Ilara," he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that gave nothing away. The impostor turned. Her smile was brilliant. "Your Grace, I was wondering where you had hidden yourself." A word. In the conservatory. It was not a request. He led her through the arched doorway into the humid, cloying air of the glass-roofed room. The sound of the orchestra was muted here, replaced by the trickle of a small fountain. "Is something amiss, Alistair?" she asked, her voice laced with a perfect, practiced concern. "I find myself remiss," he began, watching her face in the moonlight. "We have spoken of my lands, of your mother's plans for the wedding, but little of you. Tell me, were you fond of riding as a child?" A flicker, so brief he might have missed it. I was, Your Grace. But after my father's accident, and then my own, I lost the nerve for it." "Understandable. And Bath. Did you enjoy the waters there? I am told you were the talk of the season 5 years ago." The mask slid. Her brown eyes widened, not just in surprise, but in a flash of pure, undiluted terror. She recovered quickly, but the mask was cracked. "Bath?" She laughed, a sound as brittle as spun glass. "Oh, goodness, no. My lungs, as you know, have always been delicate. I abhor damp. I was in Switzerland, you recall, the mountain air. My mother insisted." "Of course," Alistair said softly. "The mountain air." He looked down at her left hand, resting on his arm. He lifted it. She tensed. With deliberate care, he unfastened the tiny pearl button of her glove and began to peel it back. "Your Grace!" she gasped, trying to pull away. "What are you?" He didn't stop. He exposed her hand to the moonlight. It was pale, delicate, and utterly unblemished. Not a single mark, not a hint of a scar. He dropped it as if it were a venomous snake. "You will return to the ballroom," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper more dangerous than any shout. "You will smile. You will plead a headache within the hour and return to your mother's house. If you breathe a word of this, if you attempt to flee, I will not be responsible for the consequences. Am I understood?" She was pale, trembling, her eyes wide with fear. She nodded, unable to speak. "Good." He escorted her back to the edge of the ballroom, bowed and walked away, leaving her to her feigned headache. He needed his man. Alistair did not return to his townhouse. He went instead to a discreet address in a less fashionable, though no less expensive, part of Mayfair. He used a key and let himself into the study of Mr. Julian Firth. Firth was a man of indeterminate age, with the quiet demeanour of a scholar and the eyes of a hawk. He had served Alistair's father, and now served him as a man of discreet inquiries. He was, in essence, the Duke's private spy master, an investigator of unparalleled skill. "Your Grace," Firth said, rising from his desk, not at all surprised to see the Duke at 2 a.m. "This is unexpected. The pre-wedding gala, I believe." "The wedding is off, Firth," Alistair said, pouring himself a brandy he did not want. Firth merely raised an eyebrow. "May I ask?" "I am engaged to an impostor." The silence in the room was absolute. Firth waited. Alistair recounted the whispers, the confrontation, the flawless hand. "A bold claim, Your Grace," Firth said. "The Baroness Harrington is a formidable woman. To accuse her of such a— I am not accusing her. I am telling you, the woman in my ballroom tonight is not the real Elara Harrington. I want to know who she is. I want to know where the real Elara is, and I want to know why." Firth absorbed this. The carriage accident. 5 years ago. That is the nexus. The Baroness's finances were, as I recall, in ruins after her husband's death in that same crash. This betrothal, the Harrington dowry, it's vast. "No," Alistair said, a new, dreadful thought occurring to him. "It's not. The dowry I offered her family, in exchange for the title and connection, was substantial. I am paying to save the Harrington name. This isn't about her dowry. This is about mine." Firth's expression darkened. "Then the motive is even stronger. They are not just marrying off a daughter. They are selling a title. An impostor would be far more pliable, less likely to object." "Find the real Elara Harrington," Alistair commanded, his voice raw. "Find out what happened in that accident. I want to know everything. Start with the servants, the gossips. Start with Bath." Firth nodded. "There was a governess, one who was with the family for decades, a Miss Seraphina Vale. She was dismissed shortly after the accident. They said she was stealing. It seemed convenient. She would know the truth, if she can be found." "Find her," Alistair ordered. As he left Firth's study, the first grey light of dawn was staining the sky. Alistair felt none of his usual control. He felt a burning, righteous fury. He was being played for a fool, but the fools were the ones who believed a duke could be so easily deceived. The game was afoot, and he intended to win. Julian Firth was, above all, a thorough man. Within 48 hours he had a location. Miss Seraphina Vale had not vanished. She had fled. "Cornwall, Your Grace," Firth reported, presenting a small, dog-eared file. "A village called Porthgwine. She lives in a small cottage, Briarwood, under her sister's married name, Mrs. Daniels. She has been quiet." "Quiet or silenced?" Alistair mused. "She has received a small, quarterly stipend from an anonymous source in London. Enough to live, not enough to be comfortable. A warning, perhaps, to remain quiet. Prepare the carriage. We go to Cornwall. I will see her myself." "Your Grace, if I may," Firth advised, "your presence will attract attention. The Baroness will have an eye on you, awaiting your call upon her daughter. Your absence from London will be noted. Then I am inspecting my tin mines in Cornwall. A matter of urgent ducal business. Let the Baroness wonder. Let the impostor sweat." The journey was long, made unbearable by Alistair's churning thoughts. He had dispatched a note to the Harrington residence, a curt, formal message stating that urgent estate business had called him away and that he would be unable to call upon Lady Alara for at least a week. Let them interpret that as they wished. Porthgwen was a cluster of stone cottages clinging to a rugged cliffside, smelling of salt and fish. Briarwood Cottage was the most isolated, set back against a small wood, its garden overgrown with weeds. Alistair left Firth with the carriage and approached the warped wooden door. He knocked. A long moment passed. The door opened a crack, revealing the face of a woman in her late 60s. She was thin, her hair grey and pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes large and haunted. "Yes? What is it?" Her voice was a fearful whisper. "Mrs. Daniels? My name is Alistair Vance. I am here to speak with a Miss Seraphina Vale." The door slammed shut. Alistair heard the scrape of a bolt. "Miss Vale," he called, his voice calm but firm. "I am not here to harm you. I am here on behalf of Lady Alara Harrington." A muffled sob came from within. "I am the Duke of Ravenswood," he said, pressing his advantage. I was betrothed to her. I have reason to believe the woman I am engaged to is a fraud. I am here for the truth, and I can offer you protection." Another long silence. Then, the scraping of the bolt. The door opened. Seraphina Vale stared at him, her eyes tracing his features, searching for deceit. "Protection," she whispered. "No one can protect me from the Baroness." "I can," Alistair said simply. He stepped inside. The cottage was sparse, cold even in the summer. Miss Vale trembled, wringing her hands. Alistair sat at the small, rough-hewn table and waited. It took 10 minutes, but finally, the dam of 5 years of silence broke. "She was a monster," Seraphina whispered, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "The Baroness? She never loved Alara. Not the real Alara." "Tell me," Alistair urged, his voice gentle. "My Alara. She wasn't a diamond, not in her mother's eyes. She didn't care for balls or fashions. She cared for books, for horses, for the tenants. She was spirited, kind, and so very clever. The Baroness hated her for it, hated that she wasn't a simpering, biddable fool." "The scar," Alistair prompted. "Oh yes, the scar." A small, sad smile touched Miss Vale's lips. From saving a stable hound from a trap when she was 12. She was so proud of it. She said it was her mark of courage. Her mother called it a disfigurement that would ruin her chances. The story that spilled out was worse than Alistair could have imagined. The Baron, a weak but kind man, had been deep in debt. The carriage accident that killed him had been convenient. But Alara had been in the carriage with him. She wasn't unhurt, Seraphina choked. She was gravely injured, the left side of her face, oh my poor girl, and her leg. It was shattered. The doctors said she would walk again, but with a limp. And her face, they said the scarring would be significant. Alistair felt physically sick. The Baroness saw her. I was there. She didn't weep. She looked at her daughter, lying broken in that bed. And she looked at me and said, "She is useless. She is ruined." Seraphina continued, her voice gaining strength from her rage. "The Baroness saw her chance. With the Baron dead, she had control. She told the world Alara was being sent to a specialist sanatorium in Switzerland to recover from the shock. She paid me, handsomely, to disappear. She said if I ever spoke of it, she would ruin me, have me committed." "But Alara," Alistair pressed. "Where did she go? Not Switzerland?" "No." Seraphina's eyes were bleak. A week later, a private carriage came. No markings. 2 stern-looking nurses. They took Alara. She was crying out for me. They They sedated her. The Baroness told me Alara was too fragile, that she had lost her mind from the grief and the pain. She was having her committed. Committed? Where? A place in the north, up near the moors, Blackwood Manor. It's not a sanatorium. It's an asylum, a private prison for inconvenient wives and troublesome daughters. The Baroness paid them to keep her, to forget her. The room was spinning. Alistair saw it all. The Baroness, free of her useless daughter, bided her time. She found a replacement, a distant cousin, perhaps, someone desperate enough to play the part. Anya Rostova, Serafina whispered, a distant, poor relation from Russia. I saw her once, years ago. She resembled Alara in a passing way. Enough. The Baroness brought her to London, coached her, polished her, waited 5 years for the scars to fade, and then presented her to society, and to you. Anya Rostova. The impostor had a name. And Alara? Alistair asked, his voice a gravelly whisper. She is there, Your Grace. If she's still... Serafina broke down completely. Alistair stood. He placed a heavy purse on the table. Miss Vale, Mr. Firth will arrange for your safe transport to a new life, a new name, anywhere you wish. America, Australia. You will be safe, I swear it on my name. He walked out of the cottage, the salt spray on his face, mingling with a cold sweat. He was no longer just a man deceived. He was a man with a mission. He wasn't just exposing a fraud. He was staging a rescue. Firth, he said, climbing into the carriage. We ride north, to Blackwood Manor. The journey to Blackwood Manor was grim. They rode for 2 days, swapping for fresh horses, Alistair's silence more menacing than any tirade. The manicured estates of the south gave way to the bleak, windswept moors of Yorkshire. Blackwood Manor was not a manor at all. It was a fortress of grey, unforgiving stone, perched on a barren hill, surrounded by a high iron fence. It looked less like a place of healing, and more like a place where hope went to die. A thin, acrid smoke curled from its chimneys. Your Grace, this is not a place one simply enters with a warrant, Firth cautioned as they surveyed it from a ridge. The proprietor, a Dr. Silas Croft, is notoriously discreet and notoriously well-connected. He is, I believe, a cousin to Lady Beatrice Croft. He specializes in curing hysteria in high-born women. He specializes in making people disappear, Alistair corrected, his hands gripping the reins. We are not here to ask, Firth. We are here to take. Alistair did not go to the front gate. He was a duke, but he was also a man who understood power. He rode to the nearest magistrate's office in the local village, his ducal signet ring prominently displayed. He did not ask. He informed the rather startled magistrate, a Mr. Henderson, that he had credible evidence that a ward of the Crown, a noblewoman, was being held against her will at Blackwood Manor under false pretences. The magistrate, cowed by the sheer force of Alistair's authority and the weight of his title, agreed to accompany him, bringing 2 local constables. When their carriage rolled up to the gates of Blackwood, Dr. Silas Croft was waiting. He was a small, immaculate man with spectacles and a smile that did not reach his cold, grey eyes. Your Grace, he said, bowing low. An unexpected honour. And Magistrate Henderson, to what do I owe the pleasure? We are a private institution. We are here for Lady Alara Harrington, Alistair stated, stepping down from the carriage. Dr. Croft's smile faltered. I am afraid I don't... Do not lie to me, Doctor. Alistair's voice was velvet-coated steel. She was admitted 5 years ago. I am here to see her. Now. Patient confidentiality, Your Grace. This is not a patient, Magistrate Henderson interjected, puffing up with borrowed courage. This is a potential kidnapping. We have a writ to inspect your facility and locate the lady." Croft's face turned ashen. He knew he was trapped. "Of course, but I must warn you, the poor girl is not. Well, the accident, you know, it addled her mind. She's prone to fantasies. She may not even know her own name." "We will be the judge of that," Alistair said. They were led through a series of cold, antiseptic corridors. The faint sound of weeping echoed from a distant hall. The place was a prison. Croft stopped before a heavy wooden door. "Patient 3B, he said, his voice regaining some of its professional detachment. "She is difficult. We've had to keep her in isolation for her own safety." He unlocked the door. The room was tiny, with a single barred window. The smell of stale air and despair was overwhelming. A figure was huddled on a small cot, her back to them. Elara, a listman, trembling violently. "She has episodes," Dr. Croft said quickly. "She does not recognize anyone." Alistair ignored him. He stepped into the room. Firth, the magistrate, and the constables blocked the doorway. "Lady Elara," Alistair said, his voice surprisingly gentle. The figure flinched but did not turn. "My name is Alistair Vance, Duke of Ravenswood." At the name, the woman's trembling stopped. She turned, slowly. Alistair's breath caught. It was not the face from the ballroom. This woman was thin, almost skeletal. Her hair, a darker, matted copper, hung in tangles. But it was her face that held him. The right side was perfection. A high cheekbone, a clear green eye. The left side, from temple to jaw, was a web of pale, silvery scars, pulling the corner of her mouth slightly. She was, by society's standards, ruined, and she was the most beautiful thing Alistair had ever seen. She stared at him, her one good eye wide with a mix of terror and a desperate, flickering hope. You are him," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. The one Anya." "Anya?" Alistair repeated, stunned. They told me. Dr. Croft did. He said my replacement was very beautiful, that she was marrying a duke. He said no one would ever come for me, that I was the mad one." "He lied," Alistair said, his voice thick with a rage he was barely controlling. He turned to Dr. Croft, whose face was now slick with sweat. "This woman is not mad," Alistair declared. "She is a victim, and you, sir, are a criminal." "You don't understand," Croft yelped, backing away as Firth and the constables moved toward him. "It was the Baroness. She paid me. She's the one. And she's not the only one." "What do you mean?" Alistair demanded. "The Baroness. She's in debt. Deep." Croft was babbling now, desperate. "The whole scheme. It wasn't just hers. She's in debt to him. He financed it. He wanted the girl in your house, your grace. He wanted a spy." "Who?" Alistair's voice was a whip crack. "Who is he?" "Lord Malcolm Thorne." Alistair froze. Malcolm Thorne, his neighbour, his rival in Parliament, a man whose charm was as legendary as his ruthlessness, a man who had coveted the Ravenswood estates for years. It all clicked into place. The impostor wasn't just about a dowry. It was about espionage, about ruin. "Arrest him," Alistair ordered the constables, pointing at Croft. "And the magistrate will send word to Scotland Yard. I want Lord Thorne's assets frozen by morning." He turned back to Elara. She was staring at him, having understood everything. She looked broken. Alistair took off his own heavy wool travelling coat. He walked to her, knelt, and wrapped it around her thin shoulders. She flinched at his touch, then leaned into the warmth. "It's over," he said softly. Where are you taking me?" she whispered, her green eye searching his. "I am Alistair Vance," he repeated, his voice firm. "You are Ilara Harrington. You are my betrothed, and I am taking you home." Alistair did not take Ilara to London. He took her to Ravenswood Keep, his ancestral seat in the north, a fortress of granite and loyalty. It was private, secure, and far from the prying eyes of the ton. He summoned his personal physician, Dr. Marcus Price, a man he trusted with his life. For 3 days, Ilara slept, the effects of the laudanum and a half-decade of malnutrition slowly receding. Alistair sat by her bedside, watching, the fury in his chest slowly morphing into something else, a protective instinct so fierce it startled him. When she finally woke, truly woke, her mind was clear. "You are staring, Your Grace," she whispered, her voice stronger. "I am assessing," Alistair replied, not moving. She slowly brought her scarred left hand up to her cheek. "I am not what you bargained for." "No," Alistair agreed. "You are not." He watched her brace for the rejection, the pity. "The woman I bargained for," he continued, "was a hollow, polished doll, a fraud. You are a survivor. I find my actual fiancée to be a woman of rather terrifying substance. I am, I confess, intrigued." A small, hesitant smile touched the unscarred side of her mouth. "You are not what I expected, Your Grace." "Alistair," he said. "My name is Alistair." For the next week, a strange, quiet courtship began. Dr. Price oversaw her physical recovery, while Alistair oversaw the recovery of her mind. He brought her books from the library, not just poetry, but philosophy, agriculture, politics. He found, just as Miss Vale had said, that her intellect was razor-sharp. She challenged his reforms, pointing out flaws in his logic. She had a dry, wicked wit that had been buried, not broken. He found himself telling her about his plans, his duties, the weight of his title, and she listened. She understood. He found himself forgetting the perfect beauty of the impostor and becoming mesmerized by the fierce intelligence in Ilara's one good eye and the quiet courage of her scars. This was not a ruined woman. This was a woman of steel. Meanwhile, in London, the impostor, Anya Rostova, was living in a different kind of hell. Alistair's abrupt departure had panicked the Baroness, but it was Lord Malcolm Thorne who terrified Anya. Thorne, the true architect of the plot, visited the Harrington house daily. He was a handsome, silver-haired man with eyes like chips of ice. The Baroness, hopelessly in his debt, was putty in his hands. "The Duke is spooked," Thorne said to Anya one afternoon, while the Baroness was conveniently absent. He traced the line of her jaw with one finger. Anya flinched. "He will return," Anya said, her voice trembling. "Oh, he will, but he's digging. The question is, what will he find? Your performance, my dear, must be flawless. Once you are his wife, once you are the Duchess, you will have access to his studies, his ledgers, his political correspondence. You will be my eyes and my ears." "And if I refuse?" Anya whispered, her hatred for this man a burning coal in her stomach. Thorne smiled. It was a predator's smile. "My dear, Anya Rostova doesn't exist. You are a penniless orphan I plucked from a St. Petersburg slum. I gave you this life. I can just as easily take it away. And the fall from here is a long one. Do not test me." Anya was trapped. She was a pawn for the Baroness, a spy for Thorne, but worst of all, she had seen the Duke, Alistair Vance. He had been correct, polite, but in their brief encounters, she had sensed an honor in him that made her own deception feel all the more vile. She hated the Baroness. She feared Thorne, and she was beginning to believe that her only way out was death. But then, an alternative. She had to choose a side. She remembered Alistair's man, the quiet, watchful one, Mr. Firth. He had been with the Duke that first night, and she'd seen him since, watching the house from a distance. That night, Anya did something desperate. She wrote a full confession. She detailed the entire plot, her true identity, the Baroness's cruelty, and, most importantly, Lord Thorn's role as the puppet master, including his demands for espionage after the wedding. She sealed the letter. The next day, feigning a trip to the modiste, she diverted her carriage. She went to Julian Firth's address, an address she had painstakingly memorized, and handed the letter to his landlady with a single, desperate instruction. For Mr. Firth, it is a matter of life and death. She returned to the Harrington house, her heart pounding. She didn't know if she had just saved herself or signed her own death warrant. The letter arrived at Ravenswood Keep 24 hours later, delivered by Firth's fastest courier. Alistair read it in the library, Ilara watching him from across the fireplace. "It's from her," he said, his voice flat. "The imposter, Anya Rostova." Ilara tensed. "What does she say?" Alistair read the letter aloud. When he finished, the silence in the room was heavy. Ilara was the first to speak. "She is as much a prisoner as I was," Ilara said, her voice soft. "Just in a more comfortable cage." Alistair looked at her, astonished. "She conspired to steal your life, your name. She was given a choice between becoming me or remaining. Nothing. A choice made for her by Thorn and my mother. I pity her." Alistair stared at the woman before him. Her capacity for empathy, after all she had endured, humbled him. It also solidified a resolve that had been growing since the day he met her. "Thorn has overplayed his hand," Alistair said, the letter crinkling in his fist. "He sought to put a spy in my house. Instead, he has given me a witness." He looked at Ilara, her face half shadowed in the firelight. "The wedding," he said, "is in 3 days. Alistair, what are you planning?" "The Baroness and Thorn believe I am in Cornwall, licking my wounds or digging in the mud. They believe their pawn is secure. They are about to host the grandest pre-wedding gala of the season, a final triumph before they secure my name." "You cannot go back," Ilara said, a note of panic in her voice. "Oh, I am absolutely going back," Alistair said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "And so, my dear, are you?" Ilara's hand flew to her scarred cheek. "No, I cannot. Look at me. They will laugh. They will call me a freak." Alistair crossed the room and knelt before her. He took her left hand, the one with the proud, jagged scar, and brought it to his lips. "They will not laugh," he said, his voice a low vow. "They will be in awe. You are the Lady of Harrington. You are the future Duchess of Ravenswood. You are not a ghost, and you are not a victim. You are the truth, and it is time London faced the truth." He stood. "Firth has been busy. Dr. Croft is in custody and has sung like a canary. Magistrate Henderson has provided affidavits. We have Miss Vale's testimony, and now we have Anya's." "It is my word against my mother's," Ilara whispered. "No," Alistair corrected. "It is my word, and I am a duke. We will see who London chooses to believe." The night of the gala, Harrington House was ablaze with light. The Baroness was triumphant, her gown a hideous shade of purple, greeting guests. Lord Thorn stood near her, a gracious host, already acting as if he belonged. Anya, pale but composed, stood by his side, a sacrificial lamb. The whispers had been rampant all week about the Duke's absence, but the Baroness had silenced them, claiming a romantic need for solitude on his part. At 10 o'clock, the music stopped. The butler, his voice trembling, announced, "His Grace, The Duke of Ravenswood. Alistair entered. He was immaculate in his formal wear. The crowd sighed in relief. But he was not alone. On his arm was a woman. She was dressed in a simple, elegant gown of Ravenswood green. Her copper hair was coiled simply, and she wore a veil, a thick lace veil that obscured her features entirely. "Your Grace!" the Baroness cried, rushing forward, her eyes darting nervously between Alistair and the veiled woman. "You have returned, and you have brought a guest." "I have, Baroness," Alistair said, his voice carrying across the silent, watching room. He walked to the centre of the ballroom, drawing the veiled woman with him. He stopped directly in front of Anya and Lord Thorn. "Alistair," Anya whispered, her eyes wide. "Anya Rostova," Alistair said, his voice quiet but clear. "Your performance is over. I received your letter." Anya's knees buckled, but he caught her arm. "Stand," he commanded. "Your penance is to bear witness." "What is the meaning of this?" Lord Thorn boomed, stepping forward. "Duke, you are insulting your future bride." "My future bride?" Alistair laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "You, Thorn, are a fool. You and this woman," he gestured to the Baroness, "attempted to perpetrate the most audacious fraud of the century. You thought to sell me a fake." "This is madness," the Baroness shrieked. "My daughter, Elara, is standing right beside me," Alistair finished. He turned to the veiled woman. "My dear, I believe it is time." Slowly, Elara raised her hands and lifted the veil. The gasp that ripped through the ballroom was a physical thing. It was a sound of shock, of horror, and of dawning, dreadful understanding. The crowd saw her, the glorious, untouched right side of her face, and the ruined, scarred, and utterly defiant left. They saw the woman who was supposed to be mad, supposed to be dead. Elara looked at her mother. "Mother," she said, her voice clear and strong, shaking the chandeliers. "Your lies are over. Chaos is a sound, and it has many textures. The first sound in the Harrington ballroom was not a shout, but a single, collective gasp, a sharp, sibilant intake of breath from 200 lungs as Elara's veil was lifted. It was the sound of 100 perfect illusions shattering at once. For a moment, there was absolute, ringing silence. The guests were a portrait of frozen horror. They were staring not just at a scarred woman, but at the reflection of their own gullibility. Elara stood, her head high, the scar on her left cheek stark and silvery under the candlelight, a cruel, beautiful map of her past. She did not look at the gasping crowd. She looked at her mother. The Baroness Harrington's face, which had been a mask of triumph, crumpled. It passed through confusion to disbelief, to a pure, unadulterated, black acid rage. "You!" she shrieked, the sound ripping the silence. She lunged forward, her hand raised as if to strike, not at Elara but at Alistair. "What have you done? What is this monster? You bring this thing into my home." "This thing, Baroness," Alistair said, his voice a low, cold vibration that cut through her hysterics, "is your daughter." "Liar!" the Baroness spat, her eyes wild, her carefully coiffed hair coming loose. "My daughter stands right here." She grabbed Anya's arm, yanking her forward. "This is Elara. Tell them, child. Tell them who you are." Anya Rostova was weeping, her face pale as death. She looked at the Baroness, at Alistair, and then at the woman whose life she had stolen. "No," Anya whispered, the word barely audible. "Speak up," the Baroness commanded, shaking her. "No," Anya said, louder this time, pulling her arm free. I cannot." "Baroness Harrington!" a new voice called out. It was Mrs. Agatha Trimble, the Dowager, pushing her way to the front. She was not whispering now. She was holding her lorgnette like a weapon, aimed at the Baroness. "You told me at the Summerwells luncheon that your daughter was in Switzerland for 5 years, recovering her delicate lungs." "And I," piped up Lady Beatrice Croft, her cousin Dr. Croft's name a silent, guilty weight in her mind. "Remember the girl from Bath, the girl who was so awkward, but so clever. She had green eyes. This woman," she pointed a trembling, jeweled finger at Ilara, "has green eyes. The other, her eyes are brown." The crowd murmured, the tide of their allegiance turning with the swift, brutal finality of a public execution. They began to see. The height, the hair color, the bone structure. This scarred woman was the original. The other was a polished copy. "But the scar," the Baroness pleaded, realizing her defense was crumbling. "The scar from the carriage accident. It was dreadful. It disfigured her. She lost her mind. I had to send her away for her own good. She's mad. She's a lunatic. She's not my daughter. She's a ghost." "She is not mad," Alistair stated. "She is a victim. And the scar," Ilara's voice rang out, clear and strong, silencing the room once more. "You were always so obsessed with my scars, Mother. But you're mistaken. The scars on my face, those are from the carriage crash, the one you so conveniently walked away from, leaving my father dead and me ruined." She held up her left hand, the skin marked by the jagged pale line. "But this one, this I've had since I was 12, from a fox trap in the North Wood. I saved old Barrow's hound, remember? I called it my mark of courage. And you called it a disfigurement, and made me wear gloves for a decade." She stepped forward, her limp barely perceptible, a mark of her ordeal. "You didn't send me to Switzerland. You sent me to Blackwood Manor. You paid Dr. Croft to bury me, to drug me, to tell me I was insane. All so you could replace me with her. All so you could sell my name to the highest bidder. This is outrageous," a male voice boomed. Lord Malcolm Thorne, his face a mask of controlled fury, stepped forward. He had been edging toward the side door, but now, seeing his plot unravel, he chose to attack. "Your Grace, you have brought a lunatic into this fine home. You are unwell. Baroness, your daughter," he gestured to Anya, "is being slandered. Gentlemen, I ask you to escort this poor, mad creature." "You will be silent, Thorne," Alistair commanded. The sheer authority in his voice stopped Thorne mid-sentence. "Or you will find yourself in irons before the music can even restart." "On what grounds?" Thorne blustered, though a bead of sweat was visible on his temple. "I am a guest here." "You are a conspirator," Alistair said, his voice deathly quiet. "You, sir, are the true architect of this entire treasonous plot. The Baroness was a mere pawn for your greed." "Treason?" Thorne scoffed, but his colour was draining fast. "What else do you call it?" Alistair countered, taking a step toward him. "You didn't just want the Harrington name. You wanted mine. You are my political rival. You covet my lands, my influence. You financed the Baroness's debts. You found the impostor, and you placed her as a spy in my house." He looked at Anya, whose face confirmed everything. "You were to be his agent, weren't you, Miss Rostova? You were to copy my letters, my ledgers, my correspondences with Parliament. You were to find a way to ruin me. That, Lord Thorne, is not just fraud. It is espionage against a peer of the realm. It is treason. You have no proof," Thorne spat. "Haven't I?" Alistair smiled, a cold, thin gesture. As if summoned by that smile, the main ballroom doors swung open. The butler, his face pale, did not announce them. Mr. Julian Firth stepped in, and with him were two tall, grim-faced men from Scotland Yard, their dark coats a stark intrusion on the sea of colourful silk and satin. The music died. The laughter stopped. The click of the officer's boot heels on the parquet floor was the only sound. "Lord Malcolm Thorne," the lead officer said, his voice devoid of any deference. "You are under arrest by order of the Crown." Thorne, the silver-tongued politician, the master manipulator, was, for the first time in his life, speechless. He looked at Alistair, his eyes burning with a hatred that was almost primitive. "You!" he hissed, as the officers moved to flank him. "You will pay for this, Ravenswood." "You, sir, are the one who will pay," Alistair said. "For this, and for Dr. Silas Croft. Your cousin, Lady Beatrice? He is in a cell at Newgate. He has already confessed." He detailed the payments. "Your payments." As the officers clapped the heavy iron handcuffs on Thorne's wrists, a sound that echoed with shocking finality in the opulent room, the Baroness let out a final, broken wail. She crumpled to the floor, a heap of garish purple satin and social ruin. No one moved to help her. Her life, as she knew it, was over. She was, in that moment, more ruined, more mad, and more forgotten than she had ever claimed her daughter to be. The officers dragged a resisting, cursing Lord Thorne from the room. The Baroness was left to sob, ignored. And then there was only Anya. She stood alone, the impostor, the pawn. The tears had dried on her face. She looked at the wreckage of the plot, at the two women she had wronged. With a deep, shuddering breath, she walked past the weeping Baroness and stopped directly in front of Ilara. She did not curtsy. She stood, woman to woman. "My name is Anya Rostova," she said, her voice clear. "I am from St. Petersburg. I was an actress, a poor one. The Baroness. She told me you were dead. She said you had passed in the accident, and that I would be honoring your memory by—" She choked. "By saving your family's name." Her gaze hardened as she looked at Alistair. "Lord Thorne told me the truth, a month ago. He told me you were alive. He said if I did not perform as his spy, he would have my family in Russia dealt with. I am a coward. I was so afraid." She turned back to Ilara. I cannot undo what I have done. I have worn your clothes, lived in your home, taken your name, but I will not be a coward any longer." She curtsied, low and deep. "My lady, I am so profoundly sorry." She then turned to the remaining officer, who was watching her. "I am a material witness. I will testify to everything. I will accept what is coming to me." Ilara, who had watched this confession with a still, unreadable expression, finally spoke. She looked at Anya, not with hatred, but with a weary, profound understanding. "You were a prisoner, Miss Rostova, the same as I, just with a better-kept cell." She looked at Alistair. "She is not a criminal. She is a witness. She must be protected." Alistair nodded, signalling to Firth. "Mr. Firth will see you to a safe house, Miss Rostova. You will be placed in protective custody." As Firth gently escorted a weeping, grateful Anya from the room, the party was truly over. The guests began to slink away, desperate to be the first to spread the most scandalous tale of the decade. Soon, only two people were left in the center of the vast, ruined ballroom, Alistair and Ilara. He turned to her. The world had been righted, the villains vanquished. But he was left with the woman he had, by law, been bound to, and by honor, been forced to save. He looked at her, really looked at her, in the wreckage of her mother's ambition. He saw the strength in her spine, the intelligence in her one unblemished eye, and the courage etched into the other side of her face. They are all gone, she whispered, her hand instinctively rising to her cheek. Let them go, he said. He caught her hand, not the scarred one, but the one covering her face. He gently pulled it away. Do not hide. Not ever again. I am not the woman you were expecting, she whispered. No, Alistair said, his voice soft, the anger gone, replaced by a raw, new emotion. The woman I was expecting was a lie, a beautiful, empty, flawless lie. You are the truth. And the truth, I find, is breathtaking. And there, in the middle of the ballroom, with the candles guttering and the champagne growing warm, he leaned in. He did not kiss her, as a duke claiming his due. He did not kiss her as a savior. He kissed her as a man who had, against all odds, found the one thing he had given up on, an equal. It was not a kiss of passion, not yet. It was a kiss of respect, a kiss of allegiance, a public declaration, even to an empty room, that this was his choice, this was his duchess. My lords, my ladies, Alistair said, his voice light, mocking the vanished crowd. I thank you for attending. My fiancée, the real Lady Alara, and I have much to discuss regarding our wedding. He offered her his arm. She took it, and together they walked out of the wreckage of her past, leaving the shadows and the whispers behind them, and stepped out into the clean, cool night air. Weeks later, the Gazette was still feasting on the scandal. The Baroness's bargain, they called it. The Baroness Harrington, her name a synonym for disgrace, had fled to a small, damp cottage in Calais. Her creditors, her only companions. Lord Thorn's trial was swift. Stripped of his titles, he was sentenced to transportation, his name struck from every ledger. And Anya Rostova, true to Ilara's wish, was given not a punishment, but a new life. Alistair funded her passage to America, and her last letter to Ilara contained only 7 words. I will live a life worthy of your mercy. At Ravenswood Keep, the autumn wind was sharp, smelling of pine and frost. Alistair found Ilara not in the drawing room, but in the library, arguing with his estate manager over crop rotation, a ledger open on her lap. He smiled, leaning against the doorframe until she finally noticed him. Your Grace, she said, a small, teasing smile playing on the unscarred side of her mouth. Are you loitering? I am, I confess, in awe, he said, walking in. You have, in 2 weeks, undone a century of Ravenswood tradition. Mr. Davies is terrified of you. Good, Ilara said, closing the book. He's a fool. He was letting your tenants plant the same crop in the same soil for a decade. He's lucky I didn't fire him. Alistair laughed, a real, unguarded sound he hadn't realized he was capable of. He came to her, taking the ledger from her hands and setting it aside. I was prepared, he said, his voice quiet, to marry a doll, to spend my life in a polite, cold, calculated arrangement. And instead, she whispered, her eyes searching his, you are bound to a ruined, opinionated, limping. He put a finger to her lips, gently, his touch tracing the edge of her scar. I am bound to a woman of iron. I am bound to a mind that sharpens my own. I am bound to a courage that shames me. He took her left hand, the one with the mark of courage, and brought it to his lips. I am not bound, Ilara. For the first time in my life, I am free. She looked at him, the man who was all duty and honor, and saw the man who had walked into hell for her. You are not what I expected either, Alistair. I expected a duke, a title, a prison of a different sort. And what did you find? He asked. I found, she said, her voice catching, a man who saw me, the real me, when no one else, not even I, could. He leaned in, and this time, the kiss was not for an audience. It was not about respect, or duty, or honor. It was a promise, made in the firelight of their library, in the truth of their new beginning. The shattered whisper had been replaced, at last, by a lifetime. The whisper that was meant to shatter Alistair's life instead shattered a web of lies, freeing two women and revealing a love built not on perfection, but on the profound beauty of truth. Alistair and Elara proved that scars are not a mark of ruin, but a testament to survival, and that the strongest alliances are forged not in ballrooms, but in loyalty and courage. What did you think of Elara's and Alistair's journey? What part of their story moved you the most? If you were captivated by their story of justice and finding love in the most unexpected of places, please like this video and share it with someone who appreciates a story where the truth, no matter how scarred, finally wins. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another dramatic tale from our channel. Thank you for listening.